morning star rise in your heart. Peter is saying that better than this eyewitness testimony is the prophetic word, this word. Now let me ask you something. How do you know Jesus is the Christ? How do you know Jesus is Christ? Shortly after I was saved, in fact, for some years after I was saved, I would say, oh, I know Jesus is the Christ. You know how I know he's the Christ? Because he changed my life. But you know, there's something better than a changed life. Something more sure than a changed life. Something we can hold up and objectively compare to see whether he is the Christ. What a day we live in. What a day we live in. 1947. There were some Bedouins out pasturing their flock. One of the little boys took a rock and threw it into a cave that was in a hillside. And what he heard shatter caught his attention. He climbed up that rock, went in there, and he found what has become known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls, many of them, including 2 books of Isaiah, were written before Jesus was born. When they were found, there was all kinds of trepidation among the scholars. The liberals kind of drooled over the find, looking for the clues that could say, we know, we've got this now. We can prove that the Bible is not true, because the earliest existing manuscripts of the book of Isaiah before then were like 1000 A.D. So this was a millennia before any of the others. There was a millennia between the Dead Sea Scrolls and the earliest manuscripts that existed of Isaiah. The question was, what happened in that millennia? What changed? Did somebody rewrite it? Amazingly enough, to the consternation of all the liberal scholars, the book of Isaiah, written before Jesus was born, is exactly the same book we have today. Exactly the same book. Fragments of every book in the Old Testament, confirming the fact that the Bible we have has been accurately and clearly carried down through the centuries. This Bible and the Dead Sea Scrolls tell us that this Bible is true. This Bible has predictions. It has very clear predictions of who the Christ is. He's not going to be some kook from Waco. We know that, because that's not in there. He's not going to be some invisible individual in upper state New York. We know that, because there's something objective to compare it against. He's not going to be some man who comes around today, no matter how many signs and wonders he gives and promises that he gives. We know that. We have objective truth to compare the Christ against. Better than the eyewitnesses is the testimony of the Scriptures. The Bible predicts that the Christ would be born in Bethlehem, that he would have a Galilean ministry, that he would be despised and rejected. He would be a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He would be pierced. His hands and his feet would be pierced. He would be struck on the cheek. His beard would be pulled out. He would heal the sick. He would preach to the poor. He would be whipped for us. He would have stripes on his back. He would die but not undergo corruption. He would not have a single bone broken. His cloak would be torn in pieces, but his garment would be gambled over. He would die with criminals, and yet he would be buried in a rich man's tomb. He would rise again. He would rise on the 3rd day. He would be the son of David. He would be of the tribe of Judah. He would be a prophet like Moses. He would be rejected by the Jewish people, despite all the evidence. Despite all the evidence. He would be sold for money. The money he would be sold for would be used to purchase a potter's field. He would be a light to the Gentiles. That one is particularly special to us, isn't it? Because that's why we're here. We are Gentiles, and he's a light to us. He would be a light to the Gentiles. Kings would bow their knee at his name. His name would be proclaimed the world over. He would be called Wonderful. He would not be a violent man before he brings forth justice. Both mercy and judgment would meet in him. He would gently lead his followers. His followers would be scattered when he was struck down. He would enter Jerusalem upon a colt. He would see the results of giving his soul as a sin offering, and he would be glad. He would be the forerunner. He would have a forerunner who was a great prophet. All of these explicitly mentioned in the Old Testament, more sure than eyewitness testimony, more sure than being able to go into the sepulcher itself, more sure than seeing the burial cloth, the burial cloth in the shape of the head of Jesus still lying there where his head was, more sure than the testimony of the angels, better than sitting down and eating and drinking with him is the testimony of the Scriptures. We know he is the Christ because we have seen it in the Scriptures. And we know the Scriptures are true because we have evidence, concrete, clear evidence from before Jesus was born. Many of these things are mentioned in the book of Isaiah. In fact, most of these are mentioned in the book of Isaiah. I went through last night, picked out 24 different prophecies that the book of Isaiah says about Jesus. And you can go to Jerusalem today, and if they allowed you to, you could pick up a book of Isaiah that was written before he was born. We have clear, convincing proof that he is the Christ. Not just because of what he's done in my life, in your life, not just because he answers prayer, not just because of eyewitness testimony, but because he fulfilled the Scriptures. See, John said he believed, even though he didn't understand the Scriptures. It is possible to believe without the Scriptures. But the foundation on which we stand is the fact that Jesus fulfilled every possible prediction that the Scriptures have. He is the Christ. He is the Lord. He is risen, we know, because the very same Scriptures that make all these predictions about him are the very same Scriptures that say that he would rise from the dead. We have that assurance. All of these things are mentioned in the Old Testament. In Hosea, it mentions he would be called back from Egypt, and he was. It is also in Hosea that it is mentioned that he would rise from the dead on the third day. These are the reasons, the most fundamental reasons that we know he is the Christ. These are the reasons, the most fundamental reasons we know that he arose from the dead. Unlike John at the tomb, we do understand the Scriptures. And we understand that the Scriptures have said that he must rise from the dead. And we understand that the Scriptures say he must come back. Now, the interesting thing about this is that there is not a single spiritual interpretation of this first coming. Everything that he fulfilled literally.